Hey guys, welcome to the Liberal Hive Mind, a channel solely focused on exposing the abundant hypocrisy of the left. You know, the left really wants you to believe that they've done a thing, they've got something here, they've really got the Trump card. They've got the smoking gun that's gonna take down Donald Trump. I guess the walls are finally closing in. But as we know, again, they've got freaking nothing. And it's obvious the facts just don't line up, they don't align with what they're suggesting. And of course I'm referring to the Epstein thing, or rather the Democrat attempt to make a Trump-Epstein connection that appears much worse than it actually is. And well, unfortunately for them, we're seeing narrative stagnation. It's just not catching on. And that's because they've presented absolutely nothing new. And now we've got Donald Trump, who I guess has realized he can't run away from the issue, despite him clearly not enjoying the optics and being drugged through the mud on the issue. But yeah, the president has absolutely no choice. I guess he's realizing and he's tackling the issue now. And what he's saying certainly seems to line up with what we've known previous. We've got a leaked recording now of President Trump on Air Force One. I guess you could call this Donald Trump's alibi. Let me show you guys exactly what's going on. We got some stuff to get into, so let's roll the tape. All right, folks, so we've got a new leaked audio here of President Trump on Air Force One. Take a look.
Epstein has a certain reputation, obviously. But just curious, were some of the workers that were taken from you, were some of them young women?
Were some
of them young women?
Well, I don't want to say, but everyone knows the people that were taken. And it was the concept of taking people that work for me is bad. But that story's been pretty well out there. And the answer is yes, they were.
Yes, they were young women?
What do they do?
In the spa.
In the spa?
Yeah, people that work in the spa. I have a great spa, one of the best spas in the world at Mar-a-Lago. And people were taken out of the spa, hired by him. In other words, gone. And other people would come and complain, this guy is taking people from the spa. I didn't know that. And then when I heard about it, I told him, I said, listen, we don't want you taking our people, whether it was spa or not spa. I don't want him taking people. And he was fine. And then not too long after that, he did it again. And I said, out of here.
Mr. President, did one of those stolen, persons, that include Virginia Jeffrey?
I don't know. I think she worked at the spa. I think so. I think that was one of the people. Yeah. He stole her. And by the way, she had no complaints about us, as you know. None whatsoever.
So that's the president giving his side of the story, giving a little bit of a behind-the-scenes look into what actually happened based on his experience with Epstein at Mar-a-Lago. And like I alluded to in the intro, what he's saying actually perfectly lines up with everything we've already known. The left tells you that Donald Trump was Epstein's best friend and that he was involved. But you would think that if Donald Trump was actually involved with what Epstein was doing, then he would have maybe at one point traveled to the island? Maybe? But it never happened. And even Axios is reporting that Donald Trump turned down the opportunity to travel to Epstein's island. Again, we already knew this. Bill Clinton went 28 times. Donald Trump went 0 times. He's been on the flight logs. He's used Epstein's plane to get to different places. Typical stuff in wealthy elite circles, using somebody else's plane or potentially chartering somebody else's plane. And now building on the other element of the story that we already knew, that Donald Trump wasn't Jeffrey Epstein's best friend. He threw the guy out of his club. In fact, it seems Donald Trump was the only celebrity, the only elite person in frickin' Palm Beach who actually did the right thing and distanced himself from Jeffrey Epstein instead of maintaining that relationship. You can't say the same for many other elite people in the Democrat circles who had associations with Epstein for years after it was already known that he was, engaging in some of the worst crimes imaginable. If anything, Donald Trump has the best track record on the issue. And that's the real story. No hidden partnership, not some dark alliance in the shadows. No, Jeffrey Epstein was a rich creep who was potentially doing some nefarious stuff, and Donald Trump saw it and cut ties with the guy. And when Trump's referring to Jeffrey Epstein poaching his employees, what he's probably alluding to is that Jeffrey Epstein would come to his club and would try to basically convince some of the young girls that work for Donald Trump to leave employment with President Trump and his organization and rather leave with Epstein and join, whatever he was doing. And clearly the president was smart enough to realize that there was something nefarious going on, and so he made the right decision. And the idea that you would take this and build all kinds of assumptions and wacky conspiracy theories on top of this information, well, that that makes you a dishonest, bad person. And that applies to people on the right and on the left. People who are jumping to conclusions and making connections with Donald Trump that don't exist. You know, if there was actual evidence of wrongdoing, it'd be one thing. If there was something truly suspicious, then of course I'd be right there with you. But as it stands right now, there is nothing other than the fact that it seems Donald Trump just wants this thing to go away. And maybe that wasn't the smartest optics play. At least that's the way that I view it. And you know, again, I keep going right back to the same point that if Donald Trump was truly in the files in a manner that was incriminating, do you think that the Democrats would just sit on that? That they'd allow a judge to stop the release, that they wouldn't pursue that file, considering everything they did to stop Donald Trump? You think they would have a golden egg and not crack it? I mean, come on, give me a break. Over the last 16 years of holding office, Democrats have held for 12. 8 years of Obama-Biden, then 4 years of Biden. And this entire time we've known about Epstein, basically since right around the start of Obama's first year in office, right around the 2007 to 2008 mark was when Jeffrey Epstein's name and his connections were really starting to make the rounds in conspiratorial circles on the internet. And so obviously they knew, but they did nothing. Again, they're the ones with a bad track record. And it's also got me thinking, you know, we got all these people claiming that Donald Trump has skeletons in his closet. But I mean, really? You would think by now, if that was the case, we'd have something, right? Actually, here's the perfect clip to make that point. Here's Julian Assange speaking to Megyn Kelly back in 2016.
I got to ask you about the U.S. election. As you point out, you're not an American citizen. You're an Australian. You know, you're clearly not rooting for Hillary, but are you rooting for Trump?
No. If we have good information on Trump, we publish that. If we have good information on Hillary, the Democrats, we publish that. I would like to believe that no organization, no media organization in the United States would not have published the DNC email. But I don't think that's true, actually. I think MSNBC wouldn't have published them. I think the New York Times wouldn't have published most of them. And that's sad. There's incredible politicization in this election of the media. And it is a bit concerning, the allegations that by the Clinton campaign that everyone is a Russian agent are really disturbing. Bizarrely, Hillary Clinton, the Democrat, has positioned herself now to be the security candidate. She's powered up with the neocons responsible for the Iraq War, and she's grabbed on to this kind of neo-McCarthyist hysteria about Russia and is using that to demonize the Trump campaign. The Trump campaign has all sorts of things wrong with it. As far as we can see, being Russian agents is not one of them. You know, some people have asked us, when will you release information on Donald Trump? And of course, we're very interested in all countries to reveal the truth about different candidates so people can understand. But it's really hard for us to release anything worse than what comes out of Donald Trump's mouth every second day. I mean, it's part of his charismatic appeal that he speaks off the cuff. That's difficult for Donald Trump to overcome a lot of those things, even with a lot of great material coming out by WikiLeaks or other publications.
You know, when the WikiLeaks files were dropping, Assange made it clear that if they had dirt on Donald Trump, they would have released it. He wasn't running a Russian operation to influence the election. And so, you know, it's got me thinking Donald Trump has been more thoroughly investigated, scrutinized, possibly than any other politician in modern history, maybe even person on planet Earth. And just think about that. The entire media industrial complex, the FBI, state AGs, international spies, anonymous whistleblowers, deep state whistleblowers embedded in the Trump administration leaking to the media. They have thrown everything at this man, and it's been a decade of these efforts, and they've got nothing. I mean, come on. I don't know so much about Trump's clear and obvious criminal connection. Seems more like he might be the cleanest guy in the room, the only guy in Washington that they can't freaking dig any mud up on. Again, the Democrats really thought they had something, as if this was their gotcha moment, but they've got nothing. No new evidence, no criminal link, no scandal, just rehashing of old information that seems to make sense. In other words, it seems Donald Trump has more of an alibi than anything else. Anyways, that's pretty much what I got for you guys. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.